What if I told you there's a machine so massive it can lift an entire cargo ship, 10,000 tons of steel, fuel, and freight, straight into the sky? Sounds impossible, right? But before we dive into one of the boldest engineering projects ever attempted, hit that subscribe button because this isn't just about height. It's a story of strategy, survival, and the quiet force that's reshaping China's future from the inside out. Deep in the untamed wilds of Guizhou province, one of China's most rugged mountainous territories, flows a river with a reputation forged in destruction, the Wujiang River. Its name might evoke images of gentle waters winding peacefully through misty gorges, but that illusion shatters with history. For centuries, locals have feared its torrents, not merely out of superstition, but from grim experience. Towering limestone peaks rise violently from the earth, their jagged faces cutting the sky like the teeth of some ancient beast. In the rainy season, calm waters can turn monstrous within hours. Entire villages have been swallowed by landslides and floods, roads reduced to ribbons, bridges torn like paper, and travelers vanished without a trace. Those who dared to tame it often never returned. They gave it a name in hushed tones, the mountain that devours men. Not in poetry, but in death records. Navigation? Out of the question. There were no flat plains, no steady currents. Unlike the canals of Venice, or the lock systems of the Panama Canal that gradually nudge vessels upward, the terrain here offered no cooperation. If you wanted to traverse this chaotic, broken topography, you'd need 20 separate locks, each demanding constant maintenance, enormous expense, and time China couldn't afford to lose. The result? A shipping route so inefficient it was practically an insult. One container from Guizhou to Shanghai would take 2 weeks. That's twice as long as it would take from almost anywhere else in China at 3 times the cost. The impact was brutal. Local industries suffocated under logistics costs. Agricultural exports rotted before even reaching the coast. Foreign investment dried up before it even began. Guizhou, home to over 36 million people, was trapped. Cut from the surge of development transforming the rest of China. It was a prison built by nature. Where rivers once mocked engineers and swallowed dreams, now stands a colossus, an impossibility forged from ambition and steel. The Gudapon Shiplift. Its silhouette rises from the valley floor like a monolith from another world, all sharp edges and impossible height. Here's what happens. A fully loaded cargo ship glides into a rectangular basin of reinforced steel. This basin, or lift chamber, is no ordinary dock. It's a sealed cradle weighing thousands of tons and filled with over 3,000 tons of water to match the ship's buoyancy. Once inside, steel gates, each as heavy as an Airbus A380, slam shut behind it. Then, slowly, almost reverently, the entire chamber begins to rise, not on an incline, not by stepping through locks, but vertically, 199 meters into the sky. In less than half an hour, a ship is lifted to the equivalent of a 66-story skyscraper, and from the bridge of that ship, the world below begins to collapse into scale. Forests become carpets, the river becomes a thread, the mountains no longer cage you, they lie below your feet like conquered giants. And when the gates open again at the summit, what lies ahead is not just a higher elevation, but a gateway into another world, into possibility. To the untrained eye, the Gudapon Shiplift might look like a massive elevator, but calling it that would be like calling the Large Hadron Collider a science fair experiment. This structure is a marvel of contradictions, impossibly heavy, yet feather precise. Brutally powerful, yet delicately balanced. At its heart lies the chamber, 40 meters long, 12 meters wide, and filled with water and steel. It rides between 4 towering guide shafts, each drilled 70 meters deep into ancient mountain bedrock, anchoring it against earthquakes, floods, and the test of time. What makes it rise? A miracle of cable-driven engineering. Wrapped around massive winches are 256 high-tensile steel cables, each cable composed of 127 finely wound strands. Laid end to end, they would stretch over 80 kilometers. Each is strong enough to lift a jetliner. Their function? To hoist over 11,000 tons of moving water, steel, and cargo straight into the sky. But raw strength isn't enough. Precision is non-negotiable. The entire system climbs a gear, a lattice of teeth carved from custom alloys. Each tooth is engineered to absorb both brute weight and the delicate tremors caused by wind gusts, seismic pulses, and shifting water loads. The tolerances, measured not in centimeters but in millimeters. So engineers added layers of protection, counterweights to balance shifting mass, hydraulic dampers to absorb motion, and a network of nut column shock absorbers each calibrated to react in milliseconds. Even power loss isn't a concern. If the grid dies, emergency turbines kick in automatically, because one rule governs everything. No matter what, the ship must not fall. Deep inside the brain of the Gudapon shiplift is a control room that resembles a war command center more than anything maritime. Dimly lit, humming with electricity, surrounded by walls of data feeds, this is where human intention meets machine logic. But here, paranoia is not a flaw, it's the design principle. 5 independent computer systems run the lift. Not 2, not 3, 5. Each one constantly checks the others, calculating stress loads, monitoring torque shifts, evaluating gear temperatures, and predicting cable behavior in real time. And even if one of the computers disagrees with the others, the entire system halts. This isn't redundancy for safety, it's redundant for survival. A ballet of tens of thousands of variables unfolds every time the chamber rises. Wind speed, water temperature, ship weight distribution, even minute vibrations from passengers moving on board. Every beam and bolt is lined with sensors that monitor in microseconds. Every action triggers simulations, future moments predicted before they even happen. The data doesn't just flow, it whispers, it warns. The moment something veers outside tolerance, corrective action occurs instantly. Not in minutes, not in seconds, instantly. Because there's no room for delay when what you're lifting is 10,000 tons of steel, water, and cargo, a potential bomb hanging in the sky by threads of calculation. Before the Gudapon shiplift ever moved a single barge, life in Guizhou was shackled to its brutal geography. This was a province of 36 million people hemmed in by vertical limestone cliffs and steep gorges, where roads didn't just twist, they crumbled. Every journey was a negotiation with danger, and every day was a compromise with time. Villages high in the mountains grew fruit, vegetables, and medicinal herbs prized across China, but the bounty never left. With reliable roads, the produce spoiled in storage or rotted mid-journey. Entire harvests died by the roadside. Not because of drought or disease, but because they simply couldn't get out. Parents watched their children pack bags for school at dawn, not knowing if the bus would ever make it. Many never did. Landslides swept away dirt paths. Monsoon floods turned valleys into lakes. When bridges collapsed, weeks passed before replacements arrived. Education was a luxury of the coast, not the interior. Healthcare too was a distant dream. In villages along the Wujiang River, a sick child might have to be ferried by wooden boat, then driven for 6 hours on potholed roads just to reach the nearest clinic. For some families, the journey itself became a crisis. People died not from the severity of their illnesses, but from the sheer time it took to reach help. And for business, there was no reason to come. Shipping costs were 3 times higher than the national average. Freight had to be driven overland through a nightmarish maze of broken roads and steep switchbacks. No factory would survive such overhead. No investor would risk it. Guizhou's per capita GDP remained stuck at a fraction of what coastal regions enjoyed, not because the people lacked talent or will, but because the terrain crushed every attempt to scale. Entire generations grew up knowing opportunity existed, they could never reach it. They saw the ports of Shanghai and the towers of Shenzhen on television, but their own ambitions ended at the edge of the cliffside roads. They were rich in resources, coal, bauxite, timber, but poor in access. Guizhou wasn't just isolated, it was paralyzed. What once required 4 days of slow, costly trucking now took 2.5 hours on water. A barge could move effortlessly from the lower reaches of the Yangtze into Guizhou's mountainous core. Farmers now send fruit to market while it's still fresh. Students reach cities without delay. Medical supplies arrive without a race against time. Today, the Gudapon shiplift doesn't rest. It operates around the clock, 24 times a day, hoisting massive vessels from one elevation to another like toys in a child's bathtub. Each lift moves up to 3,000 tons at once, rising vertically through a staggering 72 meters, powered by a complex system of counterweights and hydraulics. And with each cycle, it rewrites the rules of inland logistics. More than 5 million tons of cargo now pass through this corridor every year. But it's not just the quantity, it's the quality. Refrigerated containers carry pharmaceuticals. Specialized tankers deliver chemicals. Barges ferry electronics, textiles, grain, raw materials, all flowing faster, cheaper, and safer than any road could ever offer. The cost of shipping has dropped by 67%. For companies once priced out of Guizhou, that single number changed everything. Manufacturers moved in. Warehouses sprung up near ports. Local businesses expanded into e-commerce, feeding their products into a logistics network that now rivals the coast. Industrial output surged 42% in just a few years. But perhaps even more shocking? Foreign investment in the region rose 83%. Investors weren't just seeing Guizhou as a remote outpost anymore. They saw it as a logistics gateway, a connector, not a dead end. Remote villages, once defined by their isolation, now serve as nodes in a nationwide network. Children walk to modern schools funded by new tax revenue. Roads, now used for local traffic rather than long-haul freight, are being repaved and maintained. And hospitals are no longer desperate waiting rooms. They are places of care, with equipment, with doctors, with time. On paper, the Gudapon shiplift is a technical marvel, but its true purpose lies hidden beneath the surface, in geopolitics, strategy, and something far deeper than infrastructure: self-reliance. China's leadership knows that the world is changing. Trade routes are shifting. Alliances are fracturing. Ports, once symbols of openness, can be turned into choke points overnight. Naval blockades, shipping disruptions, or sanctions could choke external supply chains in an instant. And so, Beijing turned inward, not to retreat, but to fortify. The dual circulation strategy, launched in 2020, is China's blueprint for economic independence. It emphasizes building a domestic market strong enough to survive and thrive even if global ties are severed. But that's not just about consumption, it's about movement, logistics, redundancy. Alongside it are giants like the Three Gorges Dam, not just for power but for regulating river levels to allow deep draft vessels to push further inland. There's the South-North Water Transfer Project, quenching the thirst of dry northern cities while doubling as a navigable route. And threading it all together, thousands of kilometers of reinforced, dam-controlled, and modernized rivers forming a vast alternative economic highway. If the ports of Shanghai or Shenzhen go dark, goods can still move. If the South China Sea becomes hostile, engines don't stop, they reroute. Gudapon and systems like it turn geography from a barrier into a buffer. What happened in Gudapon is no longer confined to the misty ridges of Guizhou. The lift may stand in China, but its impact spills beyond borders, radiating through steel rails, shipping channels, and diplomatic corridors in ways few foresaw. The Gudapon shiplift doesn't just solve a regional bottleneck, it rewrote the very playbook of inland transportation. And now that playbook is being translated into a dozen languages across 3 continents. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China is exporting not just steel and labor, but ideas. The hard-earned lessons of conquering Guizhou's hostile topography have become blueprints for similar challenges across the globe. In the Mekong Delta, in the jagged highlands of Ethiopia, in the flood-prone corridors of Central Asia, Chinese engineers are recreating the impossible. But they're not merely replicating Gudapon, they're refining it, reimagining it, scaling it up. These engineers are no longer just civil servants, they're becoming envoys of influence. With every gear they tighten in a foreign nation, they tighten China's grip on the global infrastructure narrative. Roads can be tolled, ports can be leased, but a shiplift, a vertical artery, is different. It's a lifeline. Once built, it becomes indispensable. And that's where the quiet genius of China's strategy lies. Influence doesn't arrive draped in red flags. It flows in the form of concrete pylons, hydraulic chambers, and perfectly synchronized counterweights. It speaks through the hum of motors and the sound of water being tamed. The Gudapon shiplift is part of a larger conversation, one where the language isn't English or Mandarin, but infrastructure itself. While other superpowers debate treaties, China builds leverage into the land. These projects aren't just engineering marvels, they're geopolitical anchors. Silent, immovable, permanent. When you approach the Gudapon shiplift from below, it doesn't feel like you're looking at a machine. It feels like the earth cracked open, and inside it, someone installed a vertical exclamation point. It doesn't whisper about human progress, it shouts. Its vast steel frame rises not as a monument to ego, but to persistence. Every beam seems to defy the mountain, every gear an argument against impossibility. But behind the aesthetics is something far more calculated. This structure was never just about moving ships, it was about moving ideas, redefining what inland means to a country that has long grappled with the tyranny of its terrain. China didn't want to just connect Guizhou to the Yangtze. It wanted to send a message to the world and to itself that no geography, no matter how brutal, can resist the will of design. Gudapon is a sculpture of strategy, where each bolt and beam speaks to intention. Look closely and you'll see how it stacks multiple victories in one form. It uplifts the economy. It amplifies China's technological reputation. It reinforces the nation's influence over trade routes. It solidifies the country's ability to conquer verticality with precision. It is not just the elevation of ships, it is the elevation of ambition. And when the rest of the world asked, is this even possible? China didn't just answer with a blueprint. It answered with a working masterpiece, one you can stand beneath and feel the rumble under your feet. $7.7 billion. That's what the budget said. But what China brought wasn't just a machine, it was a guarantee. And while the world watches bullet trains and megacities, it might be this. The silent, steel-hearted shiplift hidden in the cliffs of Guizhou that turns out to be China's greatest move yet. Would you dare ride inside a floating freight elevator that climbs nearly 200 meters into the sky? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.